What's going on, everyone? Welcome to a new YouTube video. Today we're going to be talking about a question that I get asked almost every single day, and that is, why aren't my photos sharp? It's a question, that a lot of people wonder. It's either straight out of camera, it's when you upload to the internet, whatever it may be. Your photos aren't as sharp as you want them to be. And while that sometimes is limited by the gear you have, a lot of it is usually because you don't have the correct settings going on inside of your camera. So today we're going to be talking about why you should use these certain settings that I have been using for the last several years. And I'm going to show you all the different settings you need to get sharper photos. Let's get into it. So first things first, if you want to get sharp photos, you need to understand that there are a lot of different autofocus modes on your DSLR camera. For this video specifically, we're going to be focusing just on one specific mode, and that is spot focus, just so that you guys can follow along with me as well. This is the method that I pretty much always use while I'm taking photos. And essentially what that means is there's different autofocus points. When you put your camera up to the viewfinder right here, you can see, for example, the 1DX right here has 61 autofocus points, and while that is a crazy amount, there's always more than one autofocus point when you choose the spot option on your camera. So if you guys go into your settings right now, for example, we're gonna go here, and you're gonna go to the autofocus section, and you can change the different settings that you want. You can even do this in live view as well, and just change which autofocus setting that you want. The reason that you want to use spot autofocusing though is because it's so much more accurate than anything else, especially when you're taking a photo of a subject or a product or anything where you really need to nail that focus in a certain section of the photo. Spot focusing is just going to, by far and large, be the best option for you because you can pick the individual focus point and then focus on that. It sounds simple, but a lot of people actually look over this and they just use the stock autofocus settings on their camera. So the spot is what we're going to be using for this video. It's also really important to utilize every single autofocus point that you have available on your camera. As I said before, the 1DX has 61 autofocus points. That is a crazy amount. I'm not going to be using necessarily every single point, but I want to make sure to use, the ones that I need. And that's why they're there. They're all over your camera's viewfinder because it allows you to pick a certain focus point and really, make sure that your image is nice and sharp and clean. I've been using this focus method for the last several years, and I literally never miss focus when I use this method. The next thing to remember, and this is especially important when you're shooting portraits, is to always focus for the eyes. I've kind of hit on this in different videos in the past, but I'm going to hit it again. It is so important to focus on the eyes when you're shooting a portrait. If you focus on anything else, such as the ears or the forehead or even the chin, whatever it may be, it's just not even remotely as interesting as when the eyes are the main focal point of the image. It brings the viewer in and it makes the photo that much more captivating. So when you're looking through your camera's viewfinder, you can select your focus point, and then based on that, you can move forward and take the photo of your subject, but make sure you're focusing on the eyes because that really is going to hit home with your portrait, and make sure that it's not overlooked or blurry or whatever that may be. If you go back and look at every single one of your portraits that you really like, most likely, I'm not saying all the time, but most likely those photos are going to be ones that have the eyes in focus. So that's really important to remember. When you're shooting a landscape or a scene, something that's a bit farther away from the camera rather than a portrait, it's also important to use a smaller aperture, which would be a bigger number on your camera, such as 5.6 to maybe f11, something like that. That's what I normally would use if I'm shooting a bit more of a landscape photo or something that's a bit farther away. It's really hard to nail those super far away shots when you're using a wider aperture, such as f1.4 or even f2, f2.8. It just gets harder and harder and harder to nail what you want in focus. So an easy solution to that obviously is just to use, an aperture such as 5.6, 6.3, anything, the higher the number, which means the smaller the aperture, you're gonna be better off when you're shooting a landscape photo. Another thing that is often overlooked when you're looking for a really clean and sharp photo is shutter speed. Shutter speed isn't something that people talk about necessarily too often, but it's really important, especially when you want a sharp image. For me, I never really go below 1/125th of a second on my camera, and if I'm using a longer telephoto lens, such as a 70-200, that number is going to be even greater, maybe 2/50th or 500th of a second, just because it's really not worth it for a shutter speed unless you're really low on light to crank it all the way down. That's most likely going to create a blurry photo, and that's not what we want. When you're shooting a moving subject or something that has a lot of movement, maybe you're shooting a car driving by or a portrait of a person walking down the street, whatever that may be, you want to make sure your shutter speed is at least at 1/500th of a second, if not more than that. 1,000 could be good, or even more than that. Whatever the light is allowing for your image, make sure that you're not going below 1/500th of a second when you're shooting a moving subject, because most likely that's going to make a blurry photo, and you don't have to worry about that. The last thing you want to worry about is the shutter speed on your camera, so just make sure that's all in check. Another super important technique in order to get sharp photos is the understanding of servo versus single shot focus modes. So what that means is AI servo is a setting on pretty much every single DSLR camera out there. The 1DX has it as well, the EOS R, the Canon 5D Mark IV, Mark II has AI servo, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, I know you guys will. But the point is that these two focus modes are really what you're going to need and what you're going to be mostly toggling in between as you're taking photos. If you're taking a photo of a moving subject and you want them to be in constant focus, single shot is not what you're going to want to use. You're going to want to use AI servo, because what you can do is you can press on the autofocus button and continuously hold that as you're taking the photo, and what AI servo does is it will continuously track and keep your subject in focus as they're moving. And a single shot just can't do that. Single shot, in my opinion, is a bit more accurate, especially when you're shooting something that's standstill, it's not moving nearly as much, and you can kind of recompose and press it once and then take the photo. Single shot is great for that, but when you're shooting a moving subject, AI servo is just clearly so much better. It allows for a really accurate shot, especially when the subject is moving. So keep that in mind as well. All in all though, I just wanted to kind of hit home a few points for you guys. I know a lot of you are struggling with getting really sharp photos in camera first. So make sure to use some of these methods. Let me know if you guys have any questions about those. I know it's a lot to take in and a lot to learn. I'm going to put a few resources down below in the description of just some helpful articles and kind of online publications that you guys can look at as well. Just to kind of hit home a few of the points that I talked about in this video. But yeah, let me know if you guys have any questions. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.